Hey, it's Jeremy from jeremy.net. I am a comic book artist, writer, creator, self publisher, and I share my creative process here with you online. If you enjoy these live streams, would like to get additional bonus live streams twice a month, you can become a Patreon subscriber for as little as $2 a month. Head on over to patreon.com/Jeremy. It's patreon.com/GERIMI. If you'd like to get a free digital sketchbook, work in progress animated GIFs delivered right to your inbox, blog posts about what I'm reading, what I'm watching, which inspired me creatively, you can sign up for my free monthly newsletter at newsletter.jeremy.net. And if you'd like to purchase physical copies of my comic books, or if you read digitally on Kindle, you can go to amazon.jeremy.net. That will forward you to my Amazon author page. All right. So today I was planning to do a little bit of comic book work, working on a cover for basically a short story that I wanted to do. But I was doing a drawing exercise the other day, and I came across a little bit of an experiment that I have, not experiment, but a drawing exercise that, hang on, dropped my drawing glove. Got to get this guy on. No glove, no love. A drawing exercise that I found to be extremely powerful and extremely useful. And I said to myself, I want to spend more time doing this exercise. And I thought, well, let's just do it during the live stream and I can share it with everybody else. And we'll see if other people find this useful. Now, before we get into this, I want to give a shout out to the source of these because I think this is a great website. I'm not sponsored by them, but these images are pulled from a site called nappy.com. They're .co, nappy.co. And basically, they are a royalty-free stock photo site, kind of like Pexels or Pixabay, but they specifically provide work for people of color. And I think that it's a great resource if you want to have stuff that you want to use for drawing reference, if doing studies like this, for whatever reason, just having resources that are more diverse will just mean a better pool of work for all people to draw from if they want to have more diverse characters in their comics or their animations, if they want to have just more resources for drawing and doing work from people of color. It's a great resource. I started using them. Like I said, not a sponsor, but a big fan. So it's a great website. I recommend you check them out if you'd like to use it as well. So other than that, other than the source of this, the photos from this session, the ethnicity is not important to this exercise. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take these photos and I'm going to do studies from them. However, what I'm going to do is I'm going to change them just a tiny bit. Let's start with, let's start with this woman here. I'm going to move her up to the top of my stack, hide these other photos. So what I'm going to do is take her photo, enlarge it a little bit, make sure I get as much screen space as possible because I'm going to need it. And I am going to take her face and I'm going to blur it ever so slightly. Not like a huge, crazy Gaussian blur, but just enough that it will make it hard for me to focus on details. Let's say about you guys probably can't even see how much I blurred it since you're looking at me on the screen. But that is all I want. Let me just bring it back down. Look, some people like 2-3% blur. That's it. That's plenty. I could even go 2%, but let's just leave it at 3%. So just slightly blurred. Um, and it's funny. So Timon's in the chat. Hey, good to see you, man. Thanks for popping in. It's funny that I'm doing a session where I'm working from reference that he asked this question. And Timon says, hello again, Jeremy. I wanted to ask, when is it okay and not okay to use reference? How do you make every race and ethnicity your own kind of character without making characters similar to celebrity? I'm scared someone would say this looks like this looks like an image I saw off of Google. Well, first off, let's start with the first thing. Being scared of someone saying this looks like an image off of Google. Why do you care? um, being an artist requires having a certain level of thick skin. And that does not mean that you don't take criticism from people. It doesn't mean that if somebody says something negative about a piece, that there isn't something to learn from it. But I think that you learn by making mistakes. So first off, I do not think that it's a mistake to use reference in most cases. I think most artists use reference to support their work. But learning how to use it took me years. And I'd say that I'm not a master at using reference, but I would say that I'm still in the process. This exercise is a good example, but I'm still in the process of learning proper ways to use it. For me, I think that there isn't necessarily a wrong time to use reference. I think that when reference slows you down too much, if you're trying to do work quickly, then that can be a problem. I think that when it's just tracing over the photo and not adding anything whatsoever, that is also, it's not that it has to be a stylistic choice. If you're choosing to completely, I see Byron's in the chat, and he says, we've moved on from cats. Well, the cats will be back again, but we can't do the stick on them forever. Hang on, I actually have to turn down my heater. I finally got a little mini heater in my studio, and it is toasty in here, and I got to change the mode in here so that it just shuts off at the right temperature, because otherwise it's just going to cook me. And speaking of cats, Khaleesi in here heard the heater pick up, and all of a sudden she ran down like, what's going on? I love heat. Let me go sit on that. So yeah, Timon, back to the question about when it's okay and not okay to use reference. Well, let's go into that other point you said. How do you make every race or ethnicity your own kind of character without making the character similar to a celebrity? Well, again, this website that I'm using for reference, nappy.co. So their whole point is that it's a website for Black stock photos. And pardon me while I get a sip of coffee. When you're drawing from celebrities, the thing is you're trying to capture a likeness and even maybe a little bit of a cartoon of that person. So maybe it's not photographically exactly like them, but let's say they happen to have thick eyebrows or full lips or a particularly broad nose, or their head has an interesting shape. You might exaggerate those features to try and really make it look like, oh, it's this actor or this singer or this dancer, whatever. When you're doing studies from that's just photo reference of a human being, they're just a person out there in the world. No one knows who this person is. So the fact that I'm doing a study from them, it shouldn't really matter. You're just really trying to say, how do I make this drawing not copy their features exactly, but try to make it feel like that person. And this is where things get a little woo-woo, because everyone has their own distinct look and feel and expressions and things that make them feel like them when you look at them. Capturing how a person feels does not mean that every single line is in the exact right place and the proportions match 100%. It's sort of like you're trying to look at the photo And this is much harder in photographs than it is in real life, which is why I'm a huge proponent of in-person figure drawing. I swear by it. It's made me a better artist. I recently got back into it, and it feels like a homecoming to me. If you can find a place, you can just Google your zip code and figure drawing. You'll find some place that you can get to in a reasonable amount of time. But the point is trying to capture their their vibe. If you want to get real woo, their essence. But the point is that what you're trying to do is figure out the lines and the shapes that give them the vibe of who this person really is. So I would definitely say just dive in, try drawing with photo reference, and don't be afraid of criticism. That's the thing. You mentioned you're afraid that someone's going to say, "Oh, this looked like you just drew took a photo off of Google." You know what? Who knows? You may be using reference that is off of Google, or maybe somebody else, maybe the photo just has that look, even if you didn't take it off of Google. You know what? That's fine. People may say what they're going to say. What's important is that you learn from it, and you don't have to post every single image that you do online. You don't have to be a crazy person like me, where you're streaming your process 24/7. But by the way, I see Voyager Art is in the chat with a really cool, like Conan-ish looking avatar. Thank you for popping in and joining the stream. I'm doing a little drawing exercise here. The exercise is going to be on proportions. So I'm going to dive into that in a minute. But just to wrap up, Timon, I would lean the other way in terms of I would use reference more often and see how you feel about your results. If you do it and you feel like it looks too much like something off of Google, then maybe that's where you say, all right, let me experiment. There's things you can do where, for instance, you can put a layer on top of a photo and do a light tracing off of it. And then what you can do is you can do a drawing based on your photo reference. So let me see. I think I have an example here in my stack of photos. Like this was something else. Let me turn that off. Okay. So this is a drawing that I was doing earlier, similar to the exercise I'm going to do now. And here's the model, and her photo is on low opacity and slightly blurred, like I'm doing. But this is a drawing done exactly over her proportions, and then to the right of it is a drawing that I tried to do just from eyeballing that. And I like the simpler drawing with the model better. It feels, it feels more like her. I didn't get the proportions down. But this is a good exercise. It's a good experiment to just try drawing directly over the photo with very limited features, and then experiment with your own drawing of the reference. Now, what I'm going to be doing is not exactly that. In fact, what I'm going to be doing is, to me, 10 times harder. And this is where I talk about the fact that I like to share the ugly part of drawing. Let's see here. And Voyager Art says, I did that myself. The avatar. Well, it's a great piece. I love it. It has kind of a Mad Magazine, like a Jack Davis Conan type feel. It looks really cool. So, like I said, the ugly part of making art. There's times, I mean, we want everything we draw to look beautiful and look awesome for people to ooh and ah. I'm telling you right now, the thing I'm about to do, my drawings are going to be ugly. And if you try this exercise, your drawings are going to be ugly too. So you have to be okay with the fact of doing something that's going to look like shit. Okay, you got to be able to do that. But the reason why I'm doing it is because it looks like shit, but I learned from it. And to me, the learning is a lot more important than trying to show off. That's, to me, that's the most important thing. So like I said, I slightly blurred this photo, and now the real crazy part is taking it. I mean, it's not crazy, but once you see me start trying to draw, you'll be like, oh wow, all right. Now what I'm going to do is I am going to flip it vertically so that I am now looking at it upside down. And now I'm going to lower the opacity. And I want to lower it not to a specific number. It really just depends on the photograph. But I want to make it just so low that I can kind of just barely see it. And the reason for that is because if I have it so that I can very, very clearly see it, it's a little bit I'll get too caught up in details. The blurring and the lowering of the opacity, all of these are to force myself to not be able to see that much of detail, and I really have to focus on the drawing. Now, what I'm going to do is do a sketch of this drawing upside down. Um, let's see here. Voyager says, "Thank you. It's actually a Frazetta sketch of Death Dealer without his helmet on, but yeah, it's definitely giving Conan vibes." Well, I mean, yeah, you can Frazetta. That makes sense completely. Like he's with his massive, like powerful warrior barbarian characters. I can definitely see, yeah, Conan, Death Dealer. It'd be interesting to see a fight between Conan and Death Dealer, and I kind of feel like Death Dealer would have the edge just by his name, but no, it's a cool piece. I dig it. Um, and Omar is in the chat. Omar says, "Hey, Jeremy. Um, good to see you, Omar. Thank you for joining us." So I think maybe you guys have heard the idea before of drawing sketches where you are working upside down or flip. Well, normally the when I'm drawing, what I like to do is look at the mirror. Oh wait, am I drawing on the low opacity layer? Yeah, I am. All right, I want to draw on the full opacity layer. There we go. Because I'm going to draw this and then I'm going to draw it a second time on top of the photo just to get a sense of how bad I do. And God forbid I actually do a good version. That could happen. The point of this exercise is that when we look at things right side up, the way we normally perceive them, we have a tendency to draw what we think we know instead of what we're actually seeing. And I have very bad proportion. Just full stop. When I draw, my proportion tends to be awful. And I realized that as I was doing a sketch from a photo the other day, that I could combine that idea of looking at a mirror reflection or looking, or even more than that, is just turning my reference upside down and working from upside down reference, that it might give me a new sense of proportion. Maybe I'd actually see things the way that they really are. And I tried it, and it was really, really hard. But most of the things that we want to learn and get better at, they are really hard. So when you do something and it sucks, it doesn't work well, or you're just like, wow, this is just killing me, how difficult this is. I feel like that's the universe telling you this is the way into improving. Now, I will tell you one of the first things is with this exercise. I don't know if you guys noticed how I started this drawing, but what I really started with was kind of a line at the top and a line at the bottom to kind of get a sense of where is the whole drawing going to be. And then from the top of the head, where's the chin? Then from the chin to the hairline, and then starting to measure vertically, like how far out does the face go from the left, the distance between that and the other side of where the hair begins on the far side. So what I start by is really kind of trying to box in the features. I'm not even really drawing. I'm mapping out where all the elements are going to go. And This is somewhat different from the way that I normally draw. I saw Voyager's comment there about Conan versus Death Dealer, and they're like, "I am Team DD." Yeah, I feel you. That's just it'd be a tough ass fight, but I think Death Dealer would take that one. I feel like at some point somebody must have done a Death Dealer comic. I know Glenn Danzig was a big comic fan. I think he might actually own the Death Dealer painting. But I want to say that in the late '90s, when he had a comic book publishing company, I feel like they did do a Death Dealer comic, and I don't think I ever picked it up. But that was actually, I think, my first exposure to Frazetta. But let's see here. So what I was saying is this thing of mapping elements out is actually very antithetical to my typical way of drawing because I tend to be a construction drawing person. Construction meaning that whatever I'm drawing, I start with, a ball shape for the head, add sort of the egg, and this is still me drawing upside down. Um, I start by trying to draw simple volumes. Put the muzzle there, nose, eye sockets, and I tend to draw more like primitive shapes. That's my normal thing. Like now switching back to right side up, the way I tend to draw is, you know, build a box, put elements in the box, add spheres, cones, cylinders. I am a construction artist, and I don't believe that construction versus site size or edge it's not that I believe that one is better than the other. It's that it's about what you're you what your what purpose you're utilizing the drawing tools and concepts for. In my case, I tend mostly to do comic books. So for me, I need to be able to, much like animators, I need to be able to imagine things from different angles, change them, have a character be looking at you this way, and then have them turn and look another way, and have it still feel like it's the same character. Those are things where being able to draw things in primitive forms come in handy. Now, this isn't quite site size, but kind of a flat two-dimensional measuring, that's more of an illustration and a painting technique. Um, and I think the best artists are artists who can use all of these tools and just pick what they need based on whatever they're doing. And in this case, in order to correct my proportion, I need to measure more. And honestly, I'll tell you this, we'll see how long it takes for me to do this session or this one drawing, but I feel like drawing upside down is one thing. Drawing with the figure, because I started doing one where I had the person turned on their side. The photo was rotated 90 degrees. That was the hardest thing for me because measuring vertically up and down, I'm gotten pretty decent at that. Not great, but I've learned to compensate for my natural shortcomings. But measuring horizontally, I tend to make figures that are either their heads are too squished, shoulders too wide, hips too narrow. Those are things I'm constantly trying to compensate for. And when you're measuring, horizontally, that becomes more challenging. And you would think if I turn a photo on its side, then that would just make it easier. It does not. It screws up my radar something fierce. And Timon, if you're still watching, this is another thought. If you're going to work from photo reference, maybe something you can consider doing is just taking the reference and, you know, flipping it not upside down like I'm doing, but just flipping it horizontally. And it's not the goal of that isn't to hide the fact that you're working from photo reference. The purpose is that when you look at anything, a mirror image of it, like I said, it tricks the brain into seeing things in a truer fashion and really just seeing the volumes and shapes. That's why if you take your own drawings and you flip them on a light box, flip them on a digital device if that you're drawing with, anytime you look at a mirror reflection, just holding a drawing up to the mirror, when you do that, it reveals things to you and you see the drawing in a whole new way. Um, Drawing with reference flipped like that will sort of change your perception. And then when you're done, you can flip it back and you'll hopefully have a drawing that has feels like more accurately observed. So these are just little techniques that you can try to get better results or more interesting results out of working with photo reference. And right here also, I mentioned that I turned the opacity really low so I couldn't get caught up in looking at details. I'm kind of moving her features a little bit from what I see in the photo, and I'm drawing a little bit more based on my understanding of facial proportions versus what her face is actually doing. And I will tell you, looking at this right now, I already feel like this is gonna be way, way off. Let's see here. And her ears are covered by her hair, which does make it slightly more challenging because I think of the ears as a very good landmark. Because you can compare the ears to the nose, and the ears tend to be about the same height, like from the bottom of the lobe to the top. They tend to be the same height as the nose. And if you notice that they don't line up, if the ears are higher, that means the head is tipped forward. If the ears are lower, it means the head is tipped back. So they're kind of like they're like depth cues. They give you a sense of what the head is doing in space. Mhm. Byron says, eye to side hairline seems too far. Yeah, yeah. I think that you are right on both sides, to be honest. That's this little line that I put in here was me trying to fix it on this side. But on the other side, if you look, just saying, all right, that's if I just look at here's the width of her eye, it looks like the hairline out there is maybe one, two. So let's say two of those widths. Now, also, that shows me like if I'm looking at this and I look at how much of her eye is actually revealed. Now, this is where we get into construction because I'm looking at this and I'm saying, all right, her head needs to be turned more because there's actually less of her eye revealed. But let's try that same thing now and say, all right, let's cut her hair off here. Let's say it's about there. Bring that in a little bit. But yeah, drawing upside down like this is just a pain in the ass. And I'm looking up here, and if I compare kind of where her chin is, I might have her chin a little too low. Not low, but a little too long. I'm actually shortening it a little bit there. Now that means bringing her shoulder on this side up a little bit, and it means bringing her shoulder on the far side up a whole lot, because also the space between where her hair ends and uh, and her trapezius muscles come out from her neck is much shorter than I have it. So again, these are kind of things where just sitting and sketching with a figure that's right side up, I might not notice any of these things. I might just kind of draw, go on about my business, and then I get to the get finished, and I'm like, huh, the proportions are wonky, and I don't really necessarily know why. But looking at this upside down stage, it reveals a whole lot more, and it's like I said, it's very, very challenging. Byron says neck too long, shoulder too far down as well. Yeah, all of this. You are 100% right. Let's bring her neck into. In fact, let's say a bit of her neck is about here. Something like that. So I am not going to do a finished drawing of this, but I would say that I have a lot more corrections to do on this one. But I'm going to pause on this for a specific reason. It's because I want to now, the amount of corrections, I could easily spend probably a whole hour just working on this drawing and trying to make improvements. I'm going to switch over to what I usually do once I finish this drawing. But all the notes that Byron made, yeah, those are absolutely true. And I think there's a lot more that needs to be done in terms of just fixing the proportions here. But I'm going to shift over to the actual photo. And now on this one, I'm still on a layer above this. I'm going to try and go in here and quickly. So now I'm tracing directly. But as you can see, all I'm really doing is just putting lines to indicate the major landmarks. And this is kind of like Charles Barg and his enveloping method, where he sort of creates an entire shape that the figure fits into, and then divides it up into smaller areas. I'm not doing that exactly, but it's kinda what I'm doing here. In fact, to be honest, as I'm doing this, I'm thinking to myself, maybe it would be useful if I just broke it down into flat shapes, and before I went in, see, because what I'm doing is I'm going in here and I'm drawing the individual smaller shapes within. And as part of this experiment, it might make more sense to start and say, all right, here's an upside down face. Whoops. Let's say here's an upside down face. And then to start, before I even go in and draw features, to just put a plumb line going down the whole thing, and then put a cross line for measurement, and then start building the features along those additional shapes. I don't usually work that way. But I think that for someone who is trying to improve proportions, and again, right there, see, I love being able to use the ear as a measurement tool. Drives me nuts to have. I mean, I could just find photos of models with ears that are exposed. That would solve the problem. And some of the other photos I do have reference for do have that. But like I said, this is an experiment, an exercise that I haven't really done before. And I saw how much it pushed and challenged me to really improve my sense of proportion. It's okay for me to say, oh, maybe there's different ways to try this, like that whole dividing the entire thing with plumb lines before I even get into the features. Something else I've been doing lately with drawing that is challenging is I've been drawing with a brush size that is thicker than I would normally draw with. And I'm forcing myself to draw with this line, but with a very, very light touch because it's similar to something when I used to, well, not used to, because I've gone back to in person figure drawing. But when I first started drawing with charcoal pencils, I was very heavy handed. And the way that I broke myself of the habit was I used very, very dark pencils. I would draw with a 6B, which is pretty dark. And it forced me to use a lighter touch because otherwise everything you draw looks like it's drawn with a Sharpie. This is a section where a little bit of detail might actually help because I'm kind of drawing into the dark and having to interpret here. Let me bump this up just a little bit. But anyway, drawing with a darker pencil forced me to use a lighter touch. And I realized that I was starting to get heavy-handed with my digital drawing as well. And I thought, huh, work with charcoal pencils. Let's see if it works with an Apple pencil. And to a certain degree, I feel like it is helping with forcing me to just be more delicate and more intentional with my mark making. And when I do want a thicker, darker line, let's say the underside of a chin, it's an intentional choice instead of me just lazily making marks. And I think that that's what a lot of these exercises that I do are for. Lazily, that's the word that I wanted to emphasize, is as much as I want drawing to just be put on some music or a podcast or an audiobook and just jam out and sketch, I get lazy. I don't think as much about I'm not as intentional with my mark making as I should be. And I do believe that once you really have absorbed the fundamentals to a deep degree, you don't need to be intentional. You can let your hand be lazy and make superficial marks or make little mistakes that add character to it. But I think that that is after you've put in the rigorous study to have the level of control that you really want. See, that's the thing. I don't have as much control over my mark making as I feel like I should or as much as I want to. And once I have that level of control, then it's a conscious choice to concede some of that control, to not have to make everything perfect and accurate. That's something that you can choose to do over time. But developing that control in the first place, that's what these exercises are for. And I think that that's also a personal choice. Like, I've had a conversation with Amar a bunch of times about me being a control freak and being a perfectionist. And I believe it's not that I disagree with him. I think that I am totally a perfectionist and a control freak. And it probably would behoove me to ease up a little bit. But this development of control is what interests me. So, kind of in the same way that some people have some bad habits and they say, well, that's just my style. I will say to some degree, the thing about me being a control freak, I mean, as far as styles go, I don't think it's the best look. But I think that's where it comes from, is just me wanting to my art to look a certain way and it's not there yet. Therefore, I do all these things to try and teach myself ways to force my art into being. Speak of the Amar, he appears. Saw you creep into the chat there. Hey, good to see you, brother. That is so crazy that I was talking about you. I didn't even look up and see that you were in the chat. Um, but yeah, to a certain degree, the perfectionism, I acknowledge fully that it's not the healthiest way to make art, but at the same time, I think we all have something that we're pursuing. And this level of obsessive control that I seem to have, or desire for control. Now, this is weird. No matter what I do, it's giving me a thick line, and I really just want a thin line. Okay, so that's enough. So you can see now the comparison between what I drew versus what I traced. And now I'm going to take, can I transform both of these together? Let's see here. So you can see how off, first off, those eyes are just bugging me. I need to get rid of those. What do the eyes look like on the actual model? Let's bring her up a bit again. Yeah, I just have her eyes a little bit too wide open on mine. So let's say I bring her eyes down a little bit more. So you can see how horrible the proportions are on the one where I was just staring at it, looking at the drawing while while trying to just make outlines. And maybe I have the opacity on a little bit too low, so I'm forcing myself to guess. But point being is that this whole exercise of drawing with the photo with the reference at a different uh, at a different angle than you're looking at, a different orientation, rotated, it really throws you off. That's the point. The point is to draw thrown off, to draw looking at a way that you're not used to looking at things. Let's see here. And Amar said, "I didn't know you were talking about me." And he said, "I had a thought today while you were responding to a thread on your Discord, which I saw that the drawing exercises that you posted on that conversation that I was having with Kingsville Fitness. Thanks for jumping in with that. Those are some good exercises." Um, Byron, why you trying to start drama? He said he heard you talking crap. Now, I was saying the fact that you have definitely called me out multiple times for being a perfectionist, and I was saying that this whole process of analyzing proportion and looking at ways to improve and my level of control, that yes, it is me being a control freak. So it's me saying the whole point was I was saying you're right, but which is kind of what most people say when you try to give them some advice. So I'm guilty of that as much as anybody else. And by the way, for anyone who came in, let me group these two here so I can hide them together. For anybody that came in late, I pulled a bunch of reference from a website called nappy.co. And it's like Pixabay or Pexels. So it's a stock photo site, but it caters towards people of color. And so I think it's a great resource. I started using it. And, for anybody else that's jumping in that didn't catch the beginning, I just want to share that again and say, definitely check out that site if you want to get some good photos to work from. So now I going to take and duplicate. Oh wait, it's taking both of them. I don't want to take both of them. I just want to take one of them. All right, so I can turn off the others. So let's take this dude and we are going to rotate him like this. So now he's looking up, an angle different than I have. And let's go in here. And like I said, just a slight blur to force me away from details. %3 is plenty. Drop the opacity down. This time, let's drop it down just 50%. Well, let's go 30%. Again, the whole point of dropping the opacity is just limiting myself so I don't focus on details. Let's see here. And Amar says, I never saw a comic done with a one-line drawing, each panel done as one line for a short story. You know what? I've never seen that either. That said, Byron says that idea sounds so cool. Hey, no one's got a copyright on it. Give it a shot. When I think about it, it doesn't sound like something that I personally want to try, but the idea of drawing with a single line all the way through, that was one of those exercises when I was in grade school and we had to do that for art class. I never particularly enjoyed that exercise. So maybe that's why it doesn't necessarily sound like something that I want to jump on. But hey, you know what, Amar? You could start an art challenge, the one line, one panel art challenge, and pick a month to do it. And each day you do a panel, and at the end of the month, you got like a 30 panel comic. Yeah, maybe that's what, a 6-page story, 8-page story, something like that. Let's see here. Amar says, however, what happening or what I meant all warrants a lie or change in direction. The one line will be fast, energetic, and give a different feeling for the comic. Well, I think that it's a challenging idea, and that's why I said maybe it makes a good art challenge. Um, but yeah, I think it's weird that I pick and choose, but I totally do. I very much am sort of like what I guess something I learned from my therapist is that idea I've said it before, is that question of, does it serve me? That's always the question I'm asking for any particular exercise. Is this something that I feel is actually helping me get to where I want to go? All right. Let me scale down this photo just a little bit, because I feel like I need a little extra space above, like between the border and where I start the drawing. I feel like I need a little extra room so I don't feel cramped. And also, let me take this and just shift it. I don't know why, but I feel like I want it to be higher up. So let's try a comparison, like a mixing of things that were working in the previous one versus weren't working. So I'm going to start with a line that, to me, is going to theoretically represent from the chin all the way to just past the hairline. And then the skull going back, the top of the skull, back of the skull. So let's say his chin is right here, underside of the jaw, going up to the ear, base of the skull, back of the neck, front of the neck, where the neck connects to the shoulders. Now, I will tell you, this shape that I have up here for the head, this is all sloppy and wrong. I'm going to block in sort of the shoulders a little bit, and then I'm going to come back and just work on fixing that shape. Because sometimes you got to get something wrong on the page so that you have something to work with. Let's see here. Amar says, I thought the real goal for all of us was to tell our stories, and the art is just a dressing to add the story. Well, I think that it is up to you to decide what the goal is. I know what my personal goals are. And I think that someone else who has different goals, it's not that every comic creator needs to have the same purpose in why they create comics. For me, the drawing, well, I feel like if your goal is simply to tell stories, you don't have to make comics. You can tell stories as a prose author. You can tell stories as a as a novelist. You can tell stories as a as a filmmaker working with actors. You can tell stories as a playwright working with actors. You can tell stories on stage as a one man performance, spoken word. You can tell stories as a musician through song, through opera, and opera is music with a it's the precursor to the musical. It's telling the story through song. Point being is that to me, the art, the drawing, is not just dressing. But when I say that not as if I'm trying to compete with or debate on that being your goal. Because for some people, the art is not the purpose, the story is the purpose. For me, I love drawing. And if I had to choose between writing stories with no art or making drawings with no story, I would choose making drawings with no story. Hang on, I gotta just clear my throat again. All right. So for me, I would choose to make drawings with no story. So that is a personal choice. Um, but the idea of art just being window dressing or not being window dressing, for you it's window dressing, and that's fine. I mean, different people make art for different purposes. I mean, a lot of people don't even look at art as a form of personal expression. There are definitely illustrators who they only put pen to paper when they are getting paid to put pen to paper. And for them, the idea of craft and process, all of these things is just, to them it's nonsensical. They're like, look, I get paid to draw, put pen to paper, try to get paid for it. Hmm. Sorry, I stopped talking because now I really am trying to. There's two ways that I think about when I'm measuring around a form. I'm going to draw a little diagram here on the side. So let's say I've got this guy, and here's this box. And let's say this box represents that guy's head. So on one hand, I'm measuring, like, let's say this is the front facial plane, and I'm thinking, brow line 2/3 of the way up, nose halfway between the brow line and the chin, ears halfway back on the skull, and I'm measuring in that manner. Now, in addition to that, there's also the flat two-dimensional measurement. I'm going to throw another layer on here where I'm simply saying, if I measure from where the top of the brow line is vertically down, what does that cross? What you know, what elements are in line with that? And same with saying from the whether it's the point, the farthest point of the chin, or whatever point I decide to measure horizontally on, looking and seeing what that lines up with. And at this stage in the drawing, I'm having a challenging time deciding which measurement to use because the box right now is a wonky box. It's not working. And I started with trying to develop just a two-dimensional shape, but I don't have a solid two-dimensional shape. So I'm sitting here, I paused because I was trying to talk to you guys, and at the same time I'm trying to decide, do I put in the box and then measure around how things line up around the box and move the box around or not? Um, so let's see here. Some more comments in the chat. Let's see. I see 93 RP1 says hi to all. Been away for a while. It's nice to be here. Well, thanks for swinging by. Join us. Good to have you back. Let's see. And by the way, if you're not subscribed, hit that subscribe button. So it'll give you hit that notification bell. So it'll let you know when we go live. We do it every Sunday, 11 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. So back to Amar. So Amar says the only reason why I said that as an artist, the art is more important is that you can fan art posters or just pinup, because if you make a comic, then the story eventually has more weight because that's how you bring them in and keep them in. He said you can essentially just be Alex Ross, being Alex Ross, how only do pinup fan art. And he said people may take that as an insult, but that is essentially what he has done. I mean, let's see. He says that's his niche, and he's become a legend to most for it. But if we take Todd and his character Spawn without the story of Spawn, when we just it would have just been a cool looking drawn character. In a sea of cool looking characters. Okay. Well, I think that a lot of people have argued what's more important in comics, the story or the artwork. I think that if the story, I'm not saying the story, I think that making an argument of one being more important than the other is a false equivalency. I think that if you tell some person will argue the art is more important. Some people will argue the story is more important. And I believe that forcing people to make a distinction is false. This is a personal opinion and it's open to debate. I'm not saying this is the truth and everyone should believe what I believe. My personal opinion is if you believe the art is more important, you're more of an illustrator. If you believe the story is more important, you're more of a writer. I believe that comics is a union of art and narrative. And the best comics have good art and good writing, and both of them work to service each other. And the collaborators, the artist and the writer, work to service each other. They work together as a team, and that it's not a competition. And I mean, honestly, I know that you spend a lot more time writing. The fact of the matter is that there's lots of people who really make a good living at, not necessarily a good living. A lot of people have like other jobs doing it, but there's people who write prose novels and are able to develop a career as an independent novelist and build a fan base. And to be honest, making the art is a much harder road. Doing comics, few people are getting rich from doing comics. I would say that why necessarily focus on even making comics if you really prefer the writing aspect? Because for me, the making the comics is because I love the medium of visual storytelling. I mean, if I had nothing to do but write all the time, I probably if comics was 90% writing, I probably would not really want to make comics. I believe that the writing is extremely important. Well, to see that again, this goes back to what I was saying about false choices. Instead of putting a percentage on it, I'd rather just say they're equal and they must work together. That is my feeling about writing and art in comics. Because illustration is storytelling. It is storytelling in pictures without words. Illustration, because a picture can be a picture and not tell a story. Illustration tells a story, it communicates. So now what I'm doing is I'm switching to breaking the head down into primitive planes. So I'm going back to my whole box idea. And now I can look and say, all right, how much of the neck do I see behind the ear? I see about that much. So I can make that the and his ear is a little bit broader than I have it. And let's move the mouth, not the mouth, but the front plane of the head a little bit more of a profile. So this is, I think one of the things that was challenging for me on this is that his head is turned more than 3/4. So let's see here. So 93 RP1 says, so nice to see the process, Jeremy. I get caught up in the beginning and end. Does that exist of a drawing way too often? It hurts my output. Um, well, I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing to put a lot of attention into the beginnings because I find for myself that all of this work here, the trying to really get the proportions and basic structures before I put any features on there, this is where I screw up drawings. And by the time you realize the drawing is screwed up, you've already spent hours working on it. And you don't want to, change anything. And I think that that's where we end up where it's like, oh, you're just trying to put lipstick on a pig. You're just trying to fix what I call a broken drawing. Um, when if we had just put some time in at the beginning, could have figured out what needs to be fixed on this drawing. So let's see here. Amar says, okay, my last point on this. What draws you into a movie or TV series, the story or the way that it looks? I also don't deny that a comic should have great art, but without a character story and the stories they're involved, what builds and keeps people involved, especially with the geeks. When they talk about comics, they talk about the stories and the journey of the character. I was going to say the front of the face and a flat plane, the left side a flat plane, then do the neck the same way with a 3/4 dome on top. And 93 RP1 Spawn style is really important to his story. A good style going with a good story. Dynamic art can always also tell a great story with no words. I'm not saying that the story is unimportant. I'm saying that the story and the art have to work together. And I think that we're kind of saying the same thing because you said that good art is important. And to be honest, I think it's not necessarily that good art is important. I think that art that fits the story is important because there are some very cartoony comic books that are very well done and might not necessarily be the best draftsman, but the story fits the artwork. And I think that that is an important factor, having something that goes along with whatever tone it is. Like, for instance, Too Much Coffee Man. I don't know if you've ever heard of Too Much Coffee Man. It's a humorous existential comic strip. The artwork is not necessarily like it's more kind of like a newspaper strip style artwork. And in fact, his comic strip has run in newspapers. Um, but point being is that it is not necessarily about how well drawn it is. It's about how it is about the story, like you said, but his work fits the story. And I think if you have different, a very hyper realistic, X-Men style comic book on something that's sort of an intimate slice of life or even a crime drama, it might not fit very well. In the same way, if you have something cute about that, some very cute, you know, cartoony story, but it's like an alien invasion or a murder mystery. Well, sometimes that can be used to great effect. Example: Strays by Tony Fleeks and oh, why am I forgetting the artist's name? I forget her name. Only Forrester. I forget her first name, but she does a very Don Bluth animated style, and that's one where it's drawn like All Dogs Go to Heaven, but it's a murder mystery. Stray Dogs, and they have another one out called Feral right now, which is the same kind of thing, but it's a zombie outbreak, except it's an outbreak of rabies. So it's a cute, like done in a cute animal style, but it is full on a horror story. And the fact that it's done with cute animals is meant to create kind of a disturbing, disjointed effect. And I think that it's very, very successful at that. But when it comes back to this, the whole conversation I brought up, and the reason why I had mentioned your name in the first place, Amar, was not about whether art or comics, whether the art or the story is more important in comics. It's about the question of what kind of control you have over it. And for me, my greater thing was not about art being more important. It's about, does the art the thing of me saying does the art serve the story brought me back to brought me back to what I think is my driving motivation, which is I think that the art is not necessarily more important, but it does need to serve the story. And the amount of time that I put into my drawings, and the amount of time I put into improving my craft and getting better is because I currently don't feel like my art expresses what's in my head. And the exercises, the work, the studies, the fact that I'm sitting here right now drawing, trying to improve my proportions over a photo that is slightly blurred and rotated 90 degrees. That is about me wanting my art to serve my story better. And some people may not care how well the art serves the story. And to that I say, do you? People need to make the thing that inspires them, compels them, gets them out of bed, whatever it is that makes them want to do creative work, that's what they should be doing. So if someone wants to do their whole comic book stick figures, do their comic book stick figures. Who am I to judge? You know, for me, it's about what do I want the art to look like? What do I want how do I envision the story? That's the reason why I spend as much time as I do and I do these exercises. Is for me, it's more about I have a vision in my head and I'm working to get that out. And the exercises, all the extra stuff that I do is about me trying to get the work closer to what I see in my head. Let's see here. So Amar says, true dynamic art can help, but it by itself with no story and no character building, then it means nothing. Because without Spawn's story, you would never know how cool a character he is. Um, let's see here. Well, I mean, how many issues of Spawn have you read? I don't know. And for me, I know that other artists came on after Todd McFarlane, but I read like the first 25 issues before I stopped collecting it because at a certain point, I didn't care about the story. You know, I was buying it purely for the art and not for the story. So that's my opinion. I don't know if anybody else, like how many people here read Spawn, and now the people who did read it, I don't know how many people read it for the art versus for the story. So let's hear. Amar says, I'm sure tons of artists have drawn cool characters or what they thought were cool, dynamically drawn characters. But that alone, you just have a pile of drawings with no weight to them unless you're going to sell posters or pinup drawings. Also, the style of Stan was more an extension of Todd's style, but developed more because of the story and his character. I feel you on that and feel the same way. That's why I make this entire argument because in our heads, what we visualize may never meet the standards or vision we have in our heads, especially with all the stuff you've seen in your head and whatnot you've seen over the years or decades. Very true. Very true. All right, so we are past an hour here, and I do feel like from moving from the flat shape to putting a box around this guy, that alone, I think, improved being able to measure the proportions because now I'm just moving parts of the box up and down. And I can do stuff like I can look over and say, all right, for instance, I look at where his goatee meets like the corner going down. I can kind of look up and say, all right, if I were to just measure vertically or horizontally, it doesn't look like it crosses any major landmarks. It kind of looks like it goes right in between. It looks like it's kind of the halfway point between where the eyes end and the ears begin. And then if I measure vertically, well, that's off, but if I measure vertically, it goes right through the middle of the lips. So I can look at here, middle of the lips, come down to and then go down to about where the eyes. So let's say halfway between. Yeah, all right. So what that tells me right there is that I need to move his lips. A little bit broader, a little further down. So, in essence, this whole entire exercise is about trying to combine volume with two-dimensional measurement and looking at a figure in a different orientation. In this case, rotated 90 degrees. When I started this session, drawing upside down. All of these things help to improve measurement. And as I have said, measurement is one of my weaknesses. Now, once you get those kind of boxes drawn in terms of these general shapes, then you can kind of go in and soften some of the lines. It's just a matter of going over a line that's a hard angle and then just saying, all right, I'm just going to draw one swooping line over that. And then maybe even come with the eraser and whoops, that's too big. Come in with the eraser and just sort of smooth that out. So you can turn what was a very hard angle into just something soft and simple. So I don't think any of these are going to win, any Spectrum illustration awards. But if you find drawing, if you find proportions to be challenging, this can be an interesting way to force yourself to work on your proportions. So, on that note, let me just go through these last couple of comments here, and then we're going to call this stream a day. So, let's see here. Hey, Mighty Geek Studios. Good to see you, man. Says, I read Spawn because it was different. And yes, it was very different. There was not a lot of comics out there. There weren't a lot of supernatural comics at the time. It was a horror comic, which also, sea full of superheroes and action and mercenaries. Wasn't a lot of horror. Wasn't a lot of supernatural horror. Doctor Strange is probably the closest. Well, Doctor Strange and Ghost Rider. And the Demon. I don't know if the Demon had an ongoing title back then. I mean, those are all books that came and went at different various levels of popularity. I mean, then there's the whole Vertigo line. So there is a place for horror. And then there's Hellboy. So hey, maybe I'm talking out of my ass. Maybe there's tons of supernatural horror. But Amar says, you get physically worn down trying to keep up and falling behind where you want to be. At some point, you have to decide what is the point of it all. He said, that's why I harp on the story. I've not read much Spawn because it was only a case I used in the case by case comparison. If I was focused on the art, then I would have really just tried to be a fine artist, because personally, I get more out of fine art than comic art. Well, here's an interesting idea, Amar. So would you say that in an ideal world, what you really want, because I know we've talked a lot about Black Sands Entertainment. Would you say that what they're doing is what you want to be doing? Like, who is a creator that you'd say currently does the thing that you say, this is, if you had to say, I need a template, I need a roadmap, I want to follow or build something similar to what somebody else has built, would it be Black Sands Entertainment? Would it be Todd McFarlane? Would it be somebody like Larry Stroman, the creator of Tribe? Now I'm curious, what as they call it in business terms or in the entertainment terms, in publishing terms, they call it a comp, which is looking at who exists in the market that is similar to what you want to do, and then you build a marketing plan around that because you look at who's doing what you want to do, who is their audience, and then you figure out who you're marketing to. So I am just curious if you have if you have comps in mind. 93 RP1 says, I do agree that the concept and story behind the visuals of the character are important, but I'd add that it's possible to communicate things with a good visual and no words or explanations. It's funny that I think of there's an artist named Jeffrey Allen Love, I believe. And his thing, he does these wordless comics that are all like large, like almost like woodcut shapes, like they look like ink prints. And they're all silent, beautifully told stories. But yeah, there's lots of people I think who do narrative visual storytelling with no dialogue. Well, that's because it's storytelling. Storytelling is not just dialogue, and it's not just narration. It's literally just showing you parts of a story. They're showing you events happen, and you can communicate a lot silently. Let's see here. Amar says, for comics, I was always drawn to the characters' backstory and their arcs more than how cool the characters looked on the page. It's just a matter of preference for how the story is communicated and how well it's gotten across. He says, my favorite character growing up was the Hulk because he was nothing more than a green Jekyll and Hyde brute. But his torment with his personal demons and parental abuse I related to. I felt I felt like if I could, I wanted to become the Hulk at some point. Which I'm thinking, if there was a character that I could become, well, I think I've said this before. I don't know if you even know this guy, but there's a character in the X-Men universe, Jamie Madrox, the Multiple Man. And his power is that he can break apart into different people, and those people can different copies of himself. And those different copies can go and experience different events and lives and interact with different people. And they can come back and merge together, and all of the memories get coalesced. And it's like he's lived all of these different lives, but still continues to be one person. And that's the power that I would want, because there's so many different things I want to do. To be honest, I mean, you could have a whole creative studio of that. And I can have a version of me that just focuses on writing, a version of me that just focuses on drawing, a version of me that just focuses on marketing, a version of me that focuses on sales and business, a version of me that just hangs out with my wife and our cats, a version of me that just is really fit and exercises and stays super healthy. I can just do all of those things. So in the question about a template or a comp, in a way, Black Sands Entertainment or Blumhouse, because I feel it has a three-pronged vehicle: comics, games, movies. They all fall in one media house. And if I could, the ultimate is a movie, then a game, and a comic. A movie, then a game, and a comic is a supplemental thing. And Amar says, yeah, I'm familiar with Multiple Man. Invulnerability and immortality have always been my favorite attributes. Yep, those are good ones to go with, and I can't argue with that. And on that note, I think we've got a good point to stop at. The one last thing I will do is I will take this and I'm going to drag this on top to see how far off I am with the features. So they're not horribly off. The shoulders you can see are too wide. Hang on, this is still not completely lined up. Now, mind you, mine is a little bit larger than the actual model. I think I may have stretched his head out too much, so it's a little bit too tall. I think his head is actually tilted a little bit more forward. And as you can see, my planes of the shoulders are off. If I put the shoulders up here, well, let's see what happens if I scale it down. If I put him in scale, now he's way off. So the shoulders I had completely off, and the head is not quite at the right angle. So those are the major things. But on its own, it's not the worst. It's not horrible. But the whole point of me doing this is that this is something I'm bad at, and I'm forcing myself to confront it. So if you're looking to improve your sense of proportion, maybe give this exercise a try. All right, guys. Let my geek studio get the last word in here. He says the most relatable characters in comic books are Hulk, Spider-Man, Superman. You can relate to each of them on some level. Yeah, I'd say so. And I see Dylan in the chat. Hey, Dylan, good to see you. We're just wrapping up here at the very end, but I'm going to hit end, and you can go back and watch the replay. But I'm glad you popped by. It was good to see you. All right. And, I tried plugging in a new camera with the hopes that the video would be clearer during the stream. And from what I see, it is clear. But all this does is it means you can see all of the cat fur on my shirt and all of the gray hairs in my beard and the cat hair that's stuck in my stubble. So I don't know. I may go back to the old grainy camera. I don't know. It might be better. All right, guys. So again, hit that like button. Hit that subscribe button if you're not subscribed. That way you can get notifications if you hit the notification bell whenever we do new live streams. And we'll be back next Sunday, 11 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. And if you want additional bonus live streams, twice a month, we do something called Art Book Study Group, where we do deep dives, some of the best art books around. And you can get access to that for as little as $2 a month. Head on over to patreon.com/Jeremy. It's patreon.com/GERIMI. We also have a Patreon exclusive Discord server where we share works in progress, tips, art talk. It's just more of what we have going on here, but throughout the week and in between, so it's a place we can give each other feedback, encouragement, just share more of what we're all doing with each other. You also get access to a online archive, so you can read my comic books digitally there as well. So patreon.com/Jeremy, patreon.com/GERIMI. If you'd like to get a free digital sketchbook, work in progress animated GIFs delivered right to your inbox, blog posts about what I'm reading, what I'm watching, what's inspiring me creatively, you can sign up for my free monthly newsletter at newsletter.jeremy.net. And if you'd like to purchase physical copies of my comic books, or if you read digital on Kindle, you can go to amazon.jeremy.net. You can pick up copies of my books there. You can pick up my first graphic novel, Eye of the Gods. It is a standalone psychological thriller about a man who is cursed with visions he cannot control. I'm the artist, writer, gray toner, inker, publisher. I basically did everything but push this book through the printing press. So if you like books, if you like movies like Enemy of the State, if you like thrillers, like Stir of Echoes, it's in that vein. Or you can pick up my most recent project, Morning Star. It is a retelling of Lucifer's Fall from Heaven as a Western. So it's an 8-issue series. Volume 1 contains issues 1 through 4. Volume 2 contains issues 5 through 8. I like to tell people it's like Paradise Lost meets Unforgiven. So if you like either of those, if you like supernatural Westerns, check it out. And if you go to the homepage of my YouTube channel, if you scroll down to flip-throughs, there are book flip-through videos of all these so you can see what's inside before you pick them up. All right, guys. Again, thank you for hanging out, spending time. I appreciate all of you. Love you guys hanging out with me. Dylan says, too high def. All right, guys. Thank you so much. That's it for now. Go be creative.